Welcome to the podcast. Súbele volumen. Conversation with the people who were with me. In the world TV. Carlos tonight. Carlos tonight. Historias de un reportero. Carlos tonight. Carlos tonight. Dale que viene lo bueno.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. I really appreciate it. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to check out carlostonight.com. There you can find more information on the podcast, see upcoming guests, and check out past episodes. That's carlostonight.com. This week, I want to introduce you to Tony Award winner Nick Demas. He's also a filmmaker, a writer, and helping people through meditation, yoga, and his podcast. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Thank you for having me. It's going good today, and better being here with you with that cozy fire you got going in the background. Happy to be here.
So Wicked is out in theaters everywhere. And so my first experience with Broadway was when my friend took me to go see, what was it? It was Phantom of the Opera. It was my first ever Broadway show. And then we watched The King and I. And I think that was it for me. That was back in college. Tell me a little bit about your first Broadway experience and what was that like?
Well, I started really young as an actor. By 16, I had my first professional job and went on my first Broadway national tour at 19 years old. So I was really fortunate, honestly, yes, I had some natural talent, but I also was surrounded by amazing mentors. I remember my very first day in rehearsal, standing around. We do this thing in the theater where we stand around a circle and we say who we are, our name, and who we're playing in the show. And I remember being so nervous, I didn't know if I could get it out of my voice, and I was shaking. And as we got around the circle, the leading lady, the diva of the cast, said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous." And she looked right at me. And I knew in that moment that she was doing that for me and that for me to feel safe in the place and space. So my first sort of Broadway experience were with these phenomenal people who were great mentors to me to get me really started in the industry. Very fortunate.
That's awesome. What made you to pursue a career in theater?
I always knew I would. There was never an option. My father really did not like this idea. You know, I was this little boy growing up in a small town in northern Michigan. And he said to me, "Nick, you are not doing this. You're going to go to school to be a lawyer because you love to talk and you love to argue." And I argued right back in that moment and said, "Oh no, I am going to do this, and I will do whatever it takes to make that happen." Uh, I think part of it was that I was rebelling against sort of normal society and my parents' expectations, but part of me was just always this super creative child. My mother will say at 2 years old, 3 years old, I used to jump up onto the table and recite all the Grimm's fairy tales for everyone. I had a magic show at, 8. At 12 years old, I began to present these shows in my garage. I would get all the neighborhood kids and I would dress them up in costumes and I'd write these skits. And I even had a, intermission lemonade stand to make money. I was a producer back then. I knew what I was doing. It was really in my lifeblood, basically. There was no other option for me.
It sounds similar to me. I was producing and writing newscasts when I was 7 years old in my bedroom and telling my mom the daily report of what my sisters were doing or not supposed to be doing. So so we have similar stories.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Reporting in the neighborhood.
Exactly. And like the kids out in the neighborhood, they would come and say, "Hey, can Carlos come out and play?" And I was like, "No, man, I'm trying to see what's the top story on the 5 o'clock news. I can't right now." So
yeah,
that's cool.
It was just in you, right? Just in you.
Yeah, and it wasn't until fourth grade when my teacher, Miss Sims at John Palmer Elementary School in Chicago, she had a lesson on storytelling. And so she would start the class with "Once upon a time, dot dot dot," and then we would have to finish the story or create our own stories. And that's where my passion of storytelling began. How about you?
I I would say those early days, and there's a teacher, Mrs. Olson, in the 6th grade. We were standing in line like, we did back then. We used to have to stand in line, right? And
Yeah.
along the hallway, and she came up to me and she pulled me out of the line and she whispered with her big blue eyes staring at me, and she said, "You're going to write the musical." And I I looked at her kind of funny, and she said, "Nick, you're gonna write the musical." And, there was something in that moment of her having this belief or this trust in me that I didn't quite yet see in myself, that was so powerful that I fell in love immediately, not only with her, I was, like, in love with Mrs. Olson, but also with this process of creating a musical. She sparked something in me. Years later, when I was featured in the New York Times, she sent me a handwritten note that said, "I don't know if you remember me, but," and I was like, "Remember you? I've been wanting to thank you for 30 years." And I started just bawling when I got that letter because she truly, in that moment, shifted and changed my life ultimately.
Yeah. They have a tendency to do that, making a difference in our lives. Nick, can you explain to our audience what a producer does? I'm not sure if it's similar to a producer in TV news, where my background is, where you stack the show, you put down what stories are going to be airing and who's assigned to what. Is that similar to what you do or used to do?
Similar, I still do.
Okay.
Similar and not. Similar in the sense that you are you're the center point. For theater, you option a show. Somebody writes a show and you option it. You purchase it basically, or rent it is actually a better way of saying it. And then you raise funds to build the show so that you can present it. And it is a combination, the job. It is so many things. It's everything from artistic vision to fundraising, like I was saying, because a musical costs $5 million to produce. It's marketing, it's casting, it's hiring the director. It's an all encompassing job, basically. Every aspect of the theater, you kind of have to have at least a little bit of knowledge in. That's what I say to people. I'm always been the one who's been the what's that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none is like a perfect producer job because I needed to know a little bit about absolutely everything, but I didn't need to be the one who was the super talented writer or the super talented director or the super talented actor. I was kind of that person who had such a love that I always had this desire to understand every aspect. And that's really what a producer has to do and is understand and know every aspect of the theater.
And how cool that you were recognized for your work. Tell us about that experience and what was it like being at the Tonys?
Yeah, the Tonys are interesting because they're not what you think when you see them on TV. They're very long, to be perfectly honest. You have to get there at like 4 in the afternoon, and you can't leave, and you can't go to the bathroom, or you have to have a seat filler. I mean, like, it's a whole thing. It's not as glamorous as it looks, to be perfectly blunt, but it is still such an honor, right, to have that recognition. I was sitting there, and this kind of well, I was sitting there in the audience, and Bernadette Peters was the presenter for the award, and it's the last award of the night, by the way, best musical. So I've been sitting there, and I kind of have to pee, to be honest. I've been sitting there for hours and hours and hours, holding it. Bernadette Peters comes up. She's got the envelope in her hands, and she says, "And the winner is," and she took this big long pause, and I was like, "Come on, come on!" And she opened the envelope and she said, "Memphis," which was the name of the show that I was a producer on. And the team stood up. Everyone's hugging each other, jumping up and down. And I had this moment where I I wasn't actually happy. I wasn't actually elated. I had my first thought, honestly, was, "Phew. Oh, thank God, because now my investors are gonna get their money back." That was the first thought that I had. The second thought was, "This is it? This isn't how this is supposed to feel." I mean, I had been practicing since I was 12 with the hairbrush, with the
Yeah.
microphone of giving the acceptance speech. This wasn't how this was supposed to feel. And they say it's like an out of body experience, and it is. I was like walking up to the stage in slow motion. And these were the thoughts that were going through my head. I'm not sure that this is how I want to feel. This isn't really it. I get, you're up there, and then that's the moment where I had this realization of me needing to do a bit of more of inner work on myself. Like, what's going on here? You're 37 years old. You've been chasing a dream. You reach the pinnacle of success and you're feeling empty. What's going on here? And that's when I went into therapy and yoga and meditation and all these other aspects that became a later part of my business and my mentoring of other people, because the mistake that I made was I was so single focused and driven, which honestly, of course, served me in many ways in my career, but it didn't serve me in my life. I didn't have a successful relationship. The house of cards sort of fell that day. While it was like the most joyous and exuberant and incredible experience to be honored, everything fell after that.
Wow. That's similar to uh, kind of me and my career. I did it for a very long time. I won the awards and all that stuff, um, and it got to the point where I wasn't having fun anymore.
Yeah.
And so I decided, it's time for a second act. It's time, time to do something else. Um, and were there signs up leading up to
Oh,
you
of
trying
course.
to? Yeah.
But I was ignoring those signs. That's not
Okay.
what's that how the brick falls on your head and then the wall and before the whole house tumbles down, the house had to tumble. I was so determined to be a success, to be the best little boy in the entire world, to prove myself to my father, all of those cliches. I was the utter cliche at the end of the day, which was painful to learn about yourself.
So was it hard for you to kind of, in a sense, let go of that life to pursue something else that makes you happier, like coaching and whatnot?
I I think that uh, yes, there was a part of my identity that was so wrapped into it, and I didn't know anything else. If you think that my first professional job, I was 16. I I only went to college for a year. I was a dropout and went on a national tour. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know how to do anything else. I didn't know how to live like a normal human being. We don't even in the theater, we don't even keep normal hours. I would go to bed at 2 in the morning because we had late night shows and then dinner after. It was not a quote unquote normal experience. So consequently, not having any idea how to be in the world, everything had to change.
So now you do something totally different, and you're helping people. What's it like helping people? And tell me exactly what you do to help them and succeed.
Yeah, there's many ways in which I work with people, honestly. Because of the years of study of meditation and yoga, I went deep. I don't do anything that I don't go all the way in. And I went and lived with a teacher. I spent hours and hours. I mean, it's like 500 hours to be a yoga teacher, 200 hours. I'm over 2,000 hours in study, right? Like I dove in and began to bring those processes and the creativity into a business. Ultimately, I began coaching people. First, it was for free. I was just sort of mentoring people because one of the great things about having a hit is that you have income coming in, right? So I began to at first for free, and then that led to me coaching professionally. And really, I mentor people to dive into their true story, into their story, and how to share that story. And that may be in speaking on stages. I help people do keynote talks using their story. I help people craft their story for film, for documentaries, for theater shows. So it's not that I'm not still producing theater. I am. It's just sort of in a new way where I'm more of the consultant and the mentor rather than the producer who's running around making sure everything's happening.
Wow. So you keep pretty busy.
Yes, that's
How do
an
you
that's an that's an understatement.
how do you find time? I know you've done, is it 3 films?
I have done 3 films, 2 documentaries, and a narrative short, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, the great thing about a documentary is that it takes quite some time.
Mhm.
Documentaries can take 3, 5, 10 years to create. So you in a documentary, you shoot a little bit. Well, let me say it. You raise some money, then you shoot a little bit, you run out of money, you raise some more money, you shoot a little bit, you find the story as you go often. It shifts and evolves. And so it's not as intense of a period. So it really has worked well with my coaching documentary filmmaking because I get to coach during the day and sort of do that at night in a way. It's not that literal, but that idea. Um, and I think that all the work that I did as a yogi, in therapy, all that work has really informed those documentaries in a way that if I hadn't done that work, I wouldn't be that type of artist today. I wouldn't be able to ask the right questions of people, to dive in and dig into the sort of human nature and the human spirit.
Mhm. What is one of the films that you make that you're most proud of?
Mm. Which one am I most proud of? Is that what you're
Mhm.
asking?
Uh-huh.
There's a film that's about to come out, about to be released, called Body Electric, that is a documentary about body image in the LGBTQ community. I think the reason I'm most proud of it is it's a personal doc, and I tell a bit of my story as well, which again, that would never have happened, before in the before times, I call them. Wouldn't have happened in the before times. Uh, and I'm proud of it because not only am I sharing my story, and it's a story of why I was the best little boy in the world, and sort of it breaks apart my shame as a little gay boy, a little gay child in northern Michigan, and the abuse that both sexual and physical abuse that I went through, and why I then ran, basically, why I moved to New York and why I was so driven. It unpacks that, but in a much larger context. So it's not just about me. It really is about how the LGBTQ community relates to each other and relates to the world in general, and how society and the othering affects us and our relationship with our bodies.
Mhm. Awesome. That sounds very interesting. Was it kind of scary to kind of open the door into your life and to share it with the world?
Yeah. Yes, it was. It's vulnerable. At the end of the day, that's the reality of it. I remember sitting in my interview, and the producer was throwing me questions, right? Rather than I had been interviewing people. And I was playing with my coffee cup, and I was sort of looking down, and I had this moment where I had the choice to make. If I either needed to be fully honest and real here and raw, or the film wasn't gonna be good. And how was I to ask others to open, to be that open, to be that real, to be that vulnerable, to share their stories if I wasn't willing to do that? And that was the turning point moment. And I just remember looking up at the camera, taking a deep breath and saying, "Okay, Gio," my producer, let's go. And it really was that choice.
Well, kudos to you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about where we can find you on social media, how we can connect with you, and maybe start working with you.
Yeah. So the best way to find me is at the Nick Demas, NickDemos, .com. That's my website, or on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm at the Nick Demas. Has to be the, because are you ready for this? There is no Nick Demas. But when I first decided to go to my website, put up a website, it was taken. And so I called the person who had it and said, nobody's used this for years. And they said, oh, I'm saving it for my unborn child.
Nice.
They wouldn't sell it to me. There's still nobody there 15 years later, but they won't sell it to me. So I am the Nick Demas.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. That's easy. And then your film, and when is that going to come out? When can we
Film's
expect
called Body Electric, and it'll be out this spring.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
Nick, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. Good luck with everything. God bless you.
Thank you, Carlos.
And that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. I really appreciate it. Remember, you can check me out at carlostonight.com. See you next time.